Easily the most exciting game of the first day of the playoffs was Grizzlies versus Timberwolves. This was not your prototypical 2-7 matchup. The Wolves won pretty convincingly in Game 1, but there is clearly plenty of room for the Grizzlies to bounce back, and with the relative inexperience of both of these rosters, this is really anyone's series. So, Grizzlies versus Timberwolves, who will win? Before we get into this video, please be sure to subscribe for daily NBA playoff content. There is going to be series previews on this channel for every round of the playoffs, and there's a couple for the first round on this one, as well as there's going to be previews over on my second channel for rounds I don't cover on this one, as well as post-game recaps on that channel covering pretty much every playoff game unless I miss one for some reason or another. So for that really high quality playoff content, subscribe here, and for just covering all of your bases, go subscribe to my second channel. Also drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference in how the video performs in the algorithm. So what will be different about this breakdown rather than the one I did for the Celtics versus the Nets is that we actually have one game to go off of, and this game was actually quite telling of what the rest of the series could look like. The first thing to address is that a lot of people were pretty surprised by the fact that the Timberwolves handled the Grizzlies as well as they did. Now, to be clear, though the final box score ended up being a double-digit game, this was a close game throughout that could have ended in Memphis's favor, but I said in the intro that the Timberwolves won this game convincingly, and that's because from a pace and control perspective, the Wolves had that from the first possession to the last. The Grizzlies were playing catch-up all game and playing at the Wolves' pace. And that is particularly impressive on Minnesota's part because even though they are a young and inexperienced team, the Grizzlies are among the best in the league at controlling pace. But as for the reason why people are surprised by this, well, I would chalk that up to ignorance, and that ignorance causing people to look at this series at face value as just simply 2 versus 7. Here's where I think that ignorance comes from. A lot of focus on teams that change to turn the calendar year has been on the Celtics and the Bulls. The Celtics for positive reasons and the Bulls for negative. But because of the extremeness on both ends of the spectrum there, little attention was paid to the Timberwolves making a change of their own. In the 35 games the Wolves played in 2021, they went 16-19 on pace for 37 wins. In the 47 games they played in 2022, they went 30-17 on pace for 52 wins. So basically, the Timberwolves have been a 50-win level team at the turn of the calendar year, but most people's impression of the Wolves comes early season because they're like, hey, is this team different? No, they still suck again. Okay, we're not paying attention anymore. So no one really paid attention to the turn that the Timberwolves made, even though people were paying that same attention to the Bulls and the Celtics. If this series was presented as two 50-ish win level teams that are young and relatively inexperienced, then the potential for this series to swing either way would be a lot more well understood. And that is what this series is, so this series can swing either way. But now let's talk about matchups, and we got a lot of information about matchups in Game 1. In Game 1, neither of these teams played good defense. It was a case of the one team that won just simply scored more than the other. They won the game on the offensive side of the floor because while they scored 130, the opponent still scored 117, which is still a lot. I cannot criticize Memphis for their offense in this game. The reason they lost is that they gave up 130, and I can't praise Minnesota's defense because while they won the game, they still gave up 117. So, what went wrong on the defensive side of the floor for both of these teams? Well, on Minnesota's end, they could not stop fouling Ja Morant. Ja attempted 20 free throws, and that accounted for half of his points in Game 1. They were also victim to overcommitting on Ja, and this left Brandon Clark open for a lot of easy shots, and both Dillon Brooks and Desmond Bane had decent enough games. However, I don't think there was much wrong with how they were defended, outside of like Dillon Brooks getting a few too many open jump shots off of screens. Really, the primary thing was how poorly they defended Ja Morant. The biggest problem I spotted for the Wolves was how Cat defended the pick and roll. He was coming up way too high on screens, which after Jaw's defender was caught on the screen would result in Cat either awkwardly backpedaling or getting blown by altogether. Or it would result in overcommitting, as I mentioned earlier, which Jaw would then pick apart with his passing. Simply put, Cat needs to drop on these screens, and whoever Jaw's primary defender is probably could try a little bit harder to fight through the screens, but if Jaw gets you with a pull-up jumper, so be it. Do not sag off so much that it results in an easy floater or enough space for him to just lift off and dunk on you, but playing this high just is not necessary. I realize that drop coverage gets a lot of flack in the modern NBA, but when you're defending a pick and roll ball handler who is not a huge pull-up threat, but is a huge drive threat, drop is the way to defend it. And I don't blame Cat for this entirely. For one, he played up on screens for most of the year, and it's been effective as the Wolves are a much better defensive team than their personnel would suggest. And second, it's more on the coaching staff to make these adjustments than it is Cat. He is being told to defend the pick and roll like this. He played drop primarily in the past, so I doubt it's going to be an issue for him. And outside of the Jaw pick and roll, I think Cat had some solid defense in this game. Try and get Jaw to basically take as many pull-up jumpers as possible. He has improved pretty drastically in that area, but he is still far from an elite shooter, and either way, you're going to take that over him killing you at the rim every time. So they just simply need to foul less. I understand a lot of Wolves fans were complaining that some of these foul calls were bullshit, but frankly to me, they all looked good for the most part, and Ja got to the line legitimately. He's just hard to stop at the rim, so you kind of have to foul him a lot. Now, as for the Grizzlies, where they got beat ironically, was through drop coverage, and really, Steven Adams in general was a problem. Where Cat was stepping up too much on screens, Adams wasn't stepping up enough, and this resulted in quite a few shots for Anthony Edwards that with, let's say, Jaren at the 5 spot on him would not have been so open. And normally you could throw some blame on the ball handler, but for the most part I think Desmond Bane and Dillon Brooks did a good job fighting through screens where they could, but when you have the best three-point shooting big man in the game setting the screen on you, you're gonna have to switch sometimes. It's just inevitable. So my solution to this, and sorry to say it, is just cut Steven Adams out of the rotation. You luckily have the versatility with your big men that you can put guys out there who can defend this type of action more effectively with both Jaren Jackson and Brandon Clark. Take this possession here. Clark is switched on to Edwards, and yeah, Ant makes the shot, but it was a much more difficult shot than he would have gotten with Adams on him in that situation. Clark was able to keep up and get a hand over that shot, and as far as I'm concerned, that's much better than Adams would be doing. The only major downside I can see of this is that Adams is really important for their offense as a screener because he's of course notorious for his hard screens, and this year he's been really effective as a short roll passer. However, I think this trade-off is well worth it. The only thing I don't see changing with this switch is how Cat played. He out-quicked Adams on a lot of plays in this game off of the dribble, but he can definitely outstrength Jaren and especially Brandon Clark when he can't do that with Adams. Not to mention Jaren is basically a foul magnet. But overall, I think you make the pick and roll less effective if you have switchable bigs out there, because a switch really is inevitable when you have two offensive players as talented as Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, so you might as well set yourself up for the best possible chance at success. I think this matchup is going to be really close, and ultimately it's probably going to come down to who makes the best adjustments. So at that point you look to the coaching, and both of these teams are pretty damn well coached, so I guess we can only wait and see. Now, as for my prediction for this series, I think it's going to be extremely close, and really it's a coin flip as to who I pick, but fuck it, they have not steered me wrong thus far by betting on them, so I'm going to continue to bet on them. My pick for this series is the Timberwolves in 7 games, but it could really go either way. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, but that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.